Well, Yolanda, thank you for that amazing documentary. That was just really excellent, and it was so wonderful to see it in this setting on a big screen. So, we got to watch it before on my computer screen, but it just makes all the difference. Amazing. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to have about 30 minutes of discussion, the four of us, and we're going to start with Yolanda. I thought I would just start with a question about who you are. And so introduce yourself and identify yourself in such an interesting way in the film. You say, mom, mobility justice strategist, activist, artist. So I came away from watching your film so impressed at the ways these labels intersect in your work. Could you speak a bit about the importance of gender, race, being a woman, being a Black woman, in your advocacy for Black bicyclist lives?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for those that were able to make it this morning. Basically, when I'm creating the film, when I do what I do, I don't think about, that basically I am all of those things that you name. But basically, that does come out and actually each year it kind of evolves. I think in terms of creating a film, I am a creative person, and so communication is like something that really stands out to me that when I need to get a message out or a thought out, this was what came to be. I was also working in Adams at the time in terms of the reconfiguration and slowing down cars. My daughter recently was in middle school, so I'd done a lot of advocating around creating safer routes to schools. So really it is a lived experience that brought me into taking kind of the still image photograph into a film. And so we had basically 3 months to pull this film together, but it really was 10 years of developing relationships and the community service work that I did that came together to even make it possible to create a 9-minute film first in 2021. This one was made in 2022. And so it was that relationship building that made this possible to actually produce a film within a budget that everyone can say, yes, we can wait. It was provided through SCAG. And then it came to be. But really, I wanted people to really enjoy the joy of being on a bike. And through the process, over those 10 years, I recognized that, wow, that I actually had not really kind of honed in on this justice issue of the redlining, of not having bike lanes, of having streets that haven't been cleaned forever or for decades. There was no street cleaning system. So it really was diving into looking at bicycling in a way that was very radical because it also was a civil rights issue. And as a Black woman, again, I think as a woman in the bicycling industry, there are those that take me serious and there's those that don't. Like, what can a woman, offer from a standpoint? And these are men that are saying this, or at least coming across that way. And it still, to this day, we are, as a woman, and also the safety of women on bikes, that's something still that we will continue to push.
Thank you so much for that answer and for your work. I mean, this is just wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to expand on this theme of relationship building. One of the things that I found so impressive about this film was really well encapsulated in that just endlessly scrolling list of expert collaborators and activist collaborators that you had. So I'm just going to say the Lewis Center, LA County Bike Coalition, Equal Justice Works, which is where Asiola Sankara was employed, right, and on fellowship when he did this work. And so many others, People for Mobility Justice, Ciclavia, City of Los Angeles, SCAG. The relationships that you built as part of making this film are just remarkable to me. And so I wanted to ask, as a documentarian, you've modeled collaboration with experts so well. Tell us about your process of curating this list of professionals who contributed with such depth to your film, professionals and activists.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the secret ingredient, right? My dad's from Louisiana, and gumbo, is a part of a dish I love. And so basically bringing people together that don't normally come together and have conversations, but also the genuineness of it. I actually just wrote like, my bar of doing the work that I do is really, questioning my internal motives. So my relationships that I develop, in most cases, I try to, be as genuine and real and to stay focused on why I'm here, why I'm doing what I do. And so I wrote down with film one, 9-minute, film two, 29-minute, there's a rawness to it. Obviously, we had to create it in 3 months, but that I don't lose that, and from a standpoint of not to get lost in trying to prove a point to anyone, but to make sure that we make the space for the very person or community that we're really trying to depict their story. So my relationship building is based on that, the genuineness of why we're here, what can you offer? This is not a competition. This is how can we connect the dots to actually create a more restorative and deeper democracy that we talk about in America, but we aren't there yet. And so it is an evolving process that will be uncomfortable sometimes. And I do feel very fortunate that I have had the opportunity to work with such a great community of people here in LA.
Wonderful. Well, now here you are, an expert documentarian, an expert organizer, and you're on a stage with 3 experts. So I'll just introduce the rest of the panel really quickly and just say about myself. I'm Peter Chesney. I have a PhD in history. I teach at Vanderbilt University, and I'm a mobility and transportation historian. We've also got Claire Eberly, who is from the Los Angeles Department of Transportation and is an expert urban planner and transportation planner. And we have Ramel Pascual, who is an expert policymaker, a former deputy mayor of Los Angeles, and the executive director of Ciclavia. And so let's think about what the 4 of us can do together in this conversation and beyond. So let me start with a question for Ramel. The museum's documentary about Yolanda's work, and now this full form of the documentary, and then the museum's documentary about your work and about Ciclavia have both featured, well, in the case of your documentary, have featured an interview with you interspersed with these festive scenes of the event that fit wonderfully into the political tradition of tactical frivolity. Have you thought about Ciclavia as a kind of rehearsal for the playful and richly visual protest strategies and culture that we've recently seen mobilized against ICE's immigration raids?
Thank you. Thank you for having me and joined by some friends. And let me just first say, comment on one thing that you said earlier, which is how does Yolanda collaborate and why do folks want to collaborate with her? Because we like her a lot and she's very well respected. And, part of that, LA is a huge high school. I always think about, we're still in high school. It's really just about how do we navigate this big high school, which then gets to your point on tactical frivolity. And, when Ciclavia started, it didn't start off in that kind of sense of protest or organizing. Certainly started off as a borrowed event from Bogota, Colombia, which Ciclovia happens. It started in 1974 in Bogota, and it's 51 years old now, and they do it every Sunday, every holiday, and it's about 85 miles long, same route in Bogota, and a handful of folks from LA went down there and had the idea to bring it up, and I was in City Hall during that time. And when you think about, this tacticalness about gatherings, you begin to realize that, we share a DNA. Ciclavia shares a DNA, really certainly with organizing principles, and it demonstrates this level of connection and intersection between joy and civic possibility, right? We didn't get to see that until after it was done in the first time, right? The very first event on October 10th, 2010, 10-10-10, you didn't know whether or not folks would come to an event where social media was not quite elevated to the point of communication, right? And you go there. I got there. Of course, I was, on a city official type, and so I got there early. And you look around and you think, how are these tens of thousands of people? A, thank you for coming. I'm not going to get fired because we did this event and no one showed up. But secondly, it was just a level of joyfully being shocked about the appetite for gatherings. And you fast forward, and we've done 64 of these events, 13 cities around the region, 350 miles of streets closed off to cars, and 70 of the 120 neighborhoods in Los Angeles. So we've been to all of the different places, so it just doesn't occur in one place. And as a rehearsal towards, a tactical frivolity, which I love you saying that, which essentially means have fun in the streets, show what it means, what you stand for is that level of protest, right? And it's a happy protest. It's a party with a purpose, but it's also an eye-opening to what you want, right? It's a free event for those who have come to Ciclavia. You choose to go, and you spend hours in the middle of a street. And in that experience, the tacticalness is not just about the gatherings of tens of thousands of people, regular folks that may not have, an expressed opinion, strong opinion, left or right, but they do have a shared experience. Whether or not on whatever political spectrum, whatever economic spectrum, and whatever community in which you live, and you have that one shared denominator, which is you're there with the same level of purpose in the same environment. So if it were a dress rehearsal, we're doing pretty well, And I think that you take a page from bring folks on, take the barriers away, and see what happens.
Thank you so much. And I'll just riff on that real quickly, by the way, and just say, I have met a lot of people in my day who will sometimes say things like, I'm an accidental activist. And I think that's a part of what tactical frivolity is people come for the fun and leave politicized. And that's happened to so many people through Ciclavia, and I'm so grateful to you for organizing it all these years and leading to the politicization into urbanism of so many people. And I think it's also, I'll add that for Ciclavia to have its roots in Bogota in the 70s is such an important American hemispheric story. There are so many people who would say, so many historians who wouldn't know that this kind of bike-based activism of reclaiming the streets didn't start in Britain in the 90s with Reclaim the Streets. It started in Colombia. And so there is a Latin American or a Global South story.
Yeah, before we go, let me add one thing, because when we started Ciclavia, in 2009, 2010, folks didn't know what it was. You're closing down streets, encouraging traffic, congestion, and people would literally, folks, when we were organizing, knocking on the doors of businesses, they didn't know what it was. They didn't want it, right? You don't want your street closed. It's an inconvenience. We would get yelled at. And then now I go to these meetings, I get yelled at still, but differently. They're yelling at me, say, you're not going far enough into my neighborhood. Why aren't you going over here instead of over here? We want you over here. And they're yelling at me with that same level of intensity as to what they don't want. They're yelling about what they do want, which I think is literally a shift in a paradigm. And thanks to Claire and her work with us in partnership, it's been a remarkable, undocumented type of experience.
Excellent. And Claire, I would like to give you the next question, by the way. So as I was watching Yolanda's film, I was thinking so much about the section of your excellent website at LADOT for Vision Zero and Livable Streets, where you invite users to make digital contributions to the memorial map. And so, yes, it's an excellent website, and compared to Ciclavia, which is so much about joy, now we're going to switch to another emotion, grief and mourning. The film features these images of physical roadside memorials, so-called ghost bikes. And I would like to ask for your take on these installations that folks have placed at the sites where their loved ones have died. I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, thank you for that question, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Yolanda, so much for your work. I've seen the film before. It's been maybe, I don't know, a year or so, a couple of years, and every time I see new things in it and take more away, and of course, Ramel, it's always a pleasure. I think the visual of the ghost bikes that we see in the film, the idea of memorials, and remembrance. With the ghost bikes, it's so much about the visual. They're such a powerful visual. They're memorials, but they are also art installations, and that really represents the importance of art, certainly in the movement for mobility justice, for racial justice, for protests, like you mentioned, the tradition of the visual in protest, and for traffic safety. And particularly, I think the ghost bikes are really arresting because they take that symbol, the bicycle, of joy and pleasure in other contexts, what should be something very carefree, and represent a lost life, the life of a loved one, and the trauma that happened there in a place. So very much, it is a place-based representation and an artistic representation of grief and trauma. And I think that is really important. I'm with the city of LA, and as government, we are not great at storytelling, I think. We try, but it's not necessarily our strong suit, which is why it's very important for us to collaborate with activists, with artists, with organizers, folks really across the spectrum, from community on around, and to tell the stories. And I think the other thing that's important about the memorials, and both the ones that we have done on the city side and community memorials, there's a life represented there, and we get very absorbed in the data. That is what drives our decision making about where to make improvements for safety, where to prioritize our resources. And data is very important, but it glazes over the very important aspects of the lives that have been lost to traffic violence, and other types of violence in communities, and just the fact that there are loved ones. So I think we have a couple memorial programs. So Vision Zero, if folks aren't familiar, is actually a global, an international initiative to eliminate traffic fatalities. But we have adopted it as a policy here in Los Angeles. And for us, it means, we have a program to implement safety improvements at the city, and to redesign city streets to be safer, using proven tools, and that's where the data comes in. And Yolanda referenced a project where we first started, I think, collaborating with you on the city side, which was Adams Boulevard in West Adams, and have been fortunate to work on projects since then. But so we have done a few programs to memorialize victims at the city. We do actually have a map on our website, where folks can remember a loved one using a digital remembrance. We also have a roadside memorial program, a sign program, where we can dedicate a sign with someone's name and sort of say, there's a couple messages: slow down, look for pedestrians, give 3 feet, so in reference to passing bicyclists. And we also have a Rainbow Halo program, which was created by an artist, and was a collaboration with an artist, to hang glass halos in remembrance of people who have been killed. And we work with LA Walks, the local community organization, and families to locate those. So again, I'll say I think it's really important to have ways of calling out individual stories of individual people and of visualizing those things in a way that kind of helps us connect to the realities of that experience and from human to human.
It's so great. It's so great that the city is willing to collaborate with the community when it comes to making sure that people are remembered and to help ensure that people are safe in the future. And to use cultural methods is just so meaningful. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to give Yolanda a chance to answer some questions that I would love to hear your answers to. So the first question that I have for you, Yolanda, is based on your work, what are some policy recommendations for Claire and LA DOT that you would like to make?
Well, definitely, it's just been an amazing, opportunity to actually work with Claire and Lauren Ballard, who are my two contact people. I started working with you all around 2020-ish, maybe 2019. And I think whatever it is that, really was within both of you, to make the decision to say, I'm going to listen to this community member, as opposed to, I'm going to tell this community member what to do. And so we were able to sit down, come and meet us, have coffee in our neighborhood and talk about the changes that we need to make on our corridor. In this case, Adams Boulevard was an example. Explain what traffic violence is to community members and your ideas of how this reconfiguration or change is going to happen, and ask the community member what are some of the solutions or lived experiences that they have, which is what you both did. So I think this is a model that you can definitely, for LA DOT, make happen with planners and engineers, and so and also show our film. So the question is, how can you see this, establishing this into an initiative or a model as a part of a training or prerequisite in terms of doing community-based work?
Can I go ahead and respond? I think this is on, right? Okay. Thank you, Yolanda. So, I mean, I think we learned a lot from that experience, and we, at the time that we worked on Adams, the sort of emphasis on community knowledge, community experience, lived experience, was really starting to take hold in LA DOT, at least in certain parts of LA DOT, particularly in our Vision Zero program, where we had planners who were really dedicated and committed to adopting the approach of, instead of government telling you what we're going to do and why we're going to do it, even if we have the data, even if we know that people are dying and why they're dying, we still really need to go and understand what people's experiences are, particularly, and in many cases, because those experiences are very different than our own. And so I think that was happening at a time that kind of commitment was really taking place and incubated in our Vision Zero program at LADOT. We now have a departmental framework for community engagement that we call our community first engagement strategy, and it is about connecting with community members and centering them in the process and ensuring that we use tools and methods to collect stories and get real feedback and put it into practice. So I think we are making steps towards that policy goal. It remains a real challenge. I'll say we also have policies that dictate certain things that we do in the right of way. And we are oftentimes trying to navigate a complicated community-based process, participatory process, which we talked about before this. Is participatory planning really the right word? But to navigate that and also to fulfill the city's policy objectives. But I think that process can be messy. But we have really recognized how crucial it is to do it together. I noted in the film Pastor Patricia Fargas, who is a pastor in South LA, has a quote about if you're going to make a change to the streets, come talk to us first. And I think that really captures the importance of having those conversations and really listening. So all of that is to say, we're working on that. It takes time and resources, but we are. I see that as my job, is to really fight for those resources, to fight for training more of our staff to do that, to really making sure that not just planners, but also our engineers and folks that we have in the field have an understanding of the importance of that commitment.
Thank you, and I know you will. Yeah.
That's an amazing and very generous to take the lines of the film in and let them become policy guidance. If you're going to change the streets, come and talk to us. Beautiful. Ramel, here's a question for you, and I'm going to just ask Yolanda first, of course. What advice do you have for Ramel, Yolanda, about making Ciclavia do the best possible cultural work for the Black community?
Well, that's a hard one because Ciclavia really, on that day that it occurs, is such an injection of joy. You know, it's early in the morning, so yes, some of us have to struggle. They're night people, you know, and get up. And when we're there, if we're personally, if I'm planning to be there 2 hours, I'm there for 4 hours or 5 hours. I would say that Ciclavia has really hit a lot of nook and crannies and boulevards in Los Angeles, which is powerful, and to just keep doing it. In terms of, my question is in terms of communities of color in particular, even though the Black population only makes up 8% of the population in the city of LA, what could you see, or do you see, and have conversations around getting, you know, the Black population on bikes more? Because I know that in a lot of our communities, they're not bikeable communities. So the idea of getting on a bike, period, is kind of out of the conversation for community members, Black community members. And then also the Westmont area, which is in the county of LA, I know is very disenfranchised, period, in terms of bikes, walking, busing. Are you tapping into that? Can you share a little with us about those populations?
Thank you, Yolanda. You know, it's interesting because I do think that, you know, there's a sense of responsibility to build capacity that we're learning as we've become the experts in this. And it's okay to sit in that acknowledgement. I used to kind of be a little overly humble and say, oh no, we don't know what we're doing. We know what we're doing. And yet we, as you know, as an organization led by a person of color, we got to own that sense of leadership and needing to also know how do we help other communities build the same kind of momentum. And it took us 15 years to get to where we are. And I think that as a open streets organization, when you say Ciclavia, it becomes kind of like Kleenex. Anything that you see, there's a lot of folks on the street, people think it's a Ciclavia. I get calls for a 5K that somebody did, and some car got towed away, and they're saying, you guys were on the streets. We're like, what are you talking, you know, that was a Saturday. We do our events on a Sunday. But I think that's a good thing, right, that you've been able, so I think, but part of from a geographic perspective, let's answer your second part of your question, I think part of it is having folks understand that they can do it too. They may not necessarily get the same infusion of participation, but they need to know the how, because the making of the sausage for doing this event is it takes some practice to do. So I think capacity building is important, especially in places like unincorporated parts of the county, because not only the infrastructure and the ways in which you got to deal with just closing streets, the mechanics around it is very different than the mechanics in the city of LA, very different than the mechanics in Culver City when we're doing Culver City route with an LA combination, two different cities that we're dealing with. We did an event in Southeast cities, which was the city of LA, which is Watts, Southgate, Linwood, Huntington Park. Three cities with, or four cities with similar priorities, but different policies as to how to close streets. So understanding that dynamic is super important. And then when we went out to Claremont, Laverne, San Dimas, and Pomona, whole host of different levels of policies we have to work with. So I think understanding that each of the different jurisdictions are different, have their own ways of doing this is important to us being able to build capacity not only to the government but also to the communities that want to organize an event like this. Answer your second question, which is how do we get more folks of color, more the Black community onto bikes? I think, part of it is a behavior change and also an accessibility to the thing. Like that's two things, right? But when I look at a bike infrastructure, when I look at the desire, behavior change. So being able to offer that, what we do is, I think, can be both, is go try it. We do this every 6 weeks in different parts of the region. Tomorrow, those who don't know, we have an event tomorrow, Ciclavia on Melrose Avenue, a partnership with Stranger Things. The show, launching their 5th season, amazing, kind of, go. I think you should just go, you're gonna love it. But I think this is the whole piece, is how do you communicate joy is a human right? That's bottom line, the way I look at the work that we do. And in order for us to collectively feel comfortable, both safe and belonged, you gotta start from that foundation, brings the folks in, communities that don't normally ride bikes or need to be more, or they do, we just look at it differently, right? And we just give that infrastructure there. The more that you offer the thing to do, the more that folks will come. If they don't come the first time, that's okay. Keep on doing it. Keep on doing it until they do.
Well, you're just doing such amazing work. Thank you. Thank you. And you got me thinking about some advice that I once heard one of my mentors at UCLA give, the late Martin Wax. He was a transportation engineer, and you've heard of him. He once said, and I thought it was so powerful, he said, in response to the question of how do we get more mobility justice racially in Southern California, he said, well, the public should consider buying cars for people who need them. And so I would wonder also about the potential for Ciclavia to be involved in the opportunity to distribute bicycles to people who need them, who feel like they can't afford them. That might be something to think about as well. Ramel, I really like this language that you use that I think of as being in the philosophical tradition of human-centered city planning or human-centered design. You talk about scaled belonging and a scaled sense of safety. As you were thinking about those terms, now reminded of these terms that you used in your documentary, what are some of the ways you can use Yolanda's film to define those terms?
I've watched, this is probably the third time I've watched Yolanda's film, and like Claire, I will see something very different. First you come out, you go in there with a sense of, oh my gosh. Like that kind of, that eye-opening kind of feel that you get from the information. Second time you watch it, you get an understanding of what can I do next? It gives you that drive to think through it. And now this is my third time, I begin to see the nuances of the hidden messages. I'm sure that was very intentional, but it was remarkable that it was there. And I think the thing that really resonated in there, just like the terminology I've used about scaled belonging and or scaled sense of safety. There was a term in there that says, I ride a bike because I want to race with the butterfly. I thought was extremely powerful because it was so simple. It reminds us that we use the bike. The first time we rode on a bike, you had that feeling of independence, similarly to how I visualize a butterfly. And then now as we mature and get a little older, the goals have always been, I want to own a car. What kind of car do you want to own? My car is this. And to be sustainable, my car is an EV, right? So now we and I think that what messages that the documentary has literally laid out is that sense of freedom does not necessarily only live in having an automobile. That it does live in that sense of chasing that butterfly or racing that butterfly. What can that mean? It can mean a whole host of things. Does it mean a car? No.
Excellent, thank you. And let's say this will be the last question. My question for Claire, by the way, is I also have a policy recommendation for your website that I would just love to see on your website. I would benefit so much from it as a researcher, which is you have this memorial map, but I'd also love to see a memorial calendar or a memorial clock that tells people about what times of the year, what days of the week, what hours of the day are most dangerous for pedestrians and bicyclists. So I can go on your website and I can see what streets are the most dangerous, but I feel like it would be really interesting and helpful and safety advocating to see a website that said, actually, it's this hour or it's this date. So I would be very curious to hear if LADOT could consider providing something like that and what you think its uses would be.
That's a very interesting idea, and I will certainly share back with our team. And I think it importantly raises the question of not only where, but what are the other factors that make our streets unsafe and what make people vulnerable when they're using them. To answer the question about time of day, it's not super surprising. Most crashes, severe crashes or fatal crashes happen in the evening hours. Bicyclists are a little bit earlier. It tends to correlate with like the commute times. Pedestrians, 6 o'clock to midnight or 9 p.m. to midnight, I think, technically speaking. So when it's dark out and when people are moving around in their communities, coming home from work, going to the grocery store, picking their kids up, the times when you're really out and about, even if it is dark out, and that we have data that shows the time of year. Of course, it just correlates to when it's dark, right? In the winter, it's earlier. In the summer, it's later when those crashes and when the severe injuries and deaths are happening. But again, it's not super surprising the distribution of those streets. So if you look at the map that we have, yes, there are certain streets in the city that are more dangerous than others. We have a network map showing that, and they are certain types of streets, yes, but they are also concentrated in communities that are impacted by the whole range of historic racism, redlining, disinvestment, environmental injustices and burdens, and that is by design, right? That is historically by design, and those continue to be the most dangerous streets, and the people who are most vulnerable are people walking and biking, very often low income, and as you talk about in the film, people of color. So I think that the takeaway there is that there are overlapping things. Those are also the streets that don't have street lighting. They have all of the issues. And so I'll take your policy recommendation, and I think I think we can expand on that even to say, here are the factors that everyone should be aware of when they're moving around. Slow down, look out for your neighbors.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your presentations and your participation. We're at time. So let's call it a day. Thank you.
And thank you, Peter, for